Great. We're live. All right. We've got Powell Cucchiella back on for another episode today. Powell, welcome. We had you on for episode 101, talking about one of the six pillars of sport and performance psychology and in your practice, and that was on mindfulness. If you want to check that out, episode 101. It's on Powell's webpage, his bio on our webpage, monkeymindathletes.com/Powell Cucchiella. He was also a contributor to a newsletter, 7 Thoughts for Confident Performance, which was back, I don't know, a couple months ago now. But we have you back on here for another one of the 6 pillars, which is process. Powell, like I said, welcome on. I want you to kind of quickly dive into those 6 pillars, and we'll talk about process and how that relates to athletes and performance.
Yeah, thanks, Danny, for having me again. Yeah, it is those 6 skills that I'm always pushing. With you mentioned the 7 thoughts for confident performance. That is kind of that's one of them, which is self-talk. That's obviously so important. You're not going to get through a mental performance talk without having thoughts be a part of that conversation, and self-talk is certainly a big one. And then visualization would be another. It's another type of thought, just the visual kind, the image of what we see going through our mind. Then there's mindfulness, which we did check in on that a little bit. I appreciate you having me on to talk about that. And then the next skill being the ability to be able to go with our process and to know process. And I can't wait to get into that today. The importance of that is obviously it's extremely, like, the ability to have a process and carry it out is a necessary part of what we do. And I find that a lot of athletes don't go there enough. The fifth piece is setting training goals. And making sure that we're sticking to a process with what we train. And the last one's rhythmic breathing, the ability to, like, just kind of have a like breath work in general in all of its forms. There's not one way to do it, but it is the top way in which we can kind of regulate emotion quickly. And so those are the 6 skills I'm constantly pushing. And today with process, I'm glad we're coming on for it, because I think whenever I meet with a new athlete, making sure that they know their process and have a consistent process, both in their either in performance activity of, like, doing their sport, but also a process of what they're doing outside of it to train the elements like that. Those things they're extremely important. And so yes, process. Uh, it's funny that we talk about a process, because it's going to seem obvious, the types of things we would hope for. And I can't wait to hear from you on maybe the hockey element, which you know quite well, of what is the in practice or in game process you would hope for from your athletes. But the interesting thing is that as soon as we are met with anxiety, doubt, frustration, anger, whatever the unpleasant emotion is, the process that helps us to be successful, we then stop doing it. It's pretty much every time with every single athlete I'm with. A confident soccer player goes to goal. They want the ball. They're scanning. They're taking people on. They're switching the field. They're attacking. Their first touch is forward. Like, that's a attack. That's a confident process. But as soon as they're met with anxiety, they're hiding. They're not wanting the ball. They're not going to goal. They're staying very safe. They're not communicating. They're not doing all the things they need to do to be successful. And so just in that little soccer context, that's process. And I guess I want to ask for you in hockey, although the different types of, like, confident behaviors probably would relate a little bit to soccer, but I would love to hear your opinion on the process element of hockey.
The way that I initially looked at it is from a individual player development perspective. I'll say, if I sit down with an athlete, I'll ask them questions like, what do you notice you're good at? Well, I skate really well. I have a pretty decent shot, and my hands are average, slightly above average. And then I ask them positionally, what do you feel like you do well? Where are you really good? And I'll use myself as an example. Well, I know once they get the puck below the dots in the offensive zone, I can be really effective. So it's like, I'll take that and I'll say, okay, as a player, you're good below the dots. So we got to try and work on getting you there. How do you get there? Well, for me, I'd like to chip it by defensemen, use my speed, and try and get the pucks into those areas. Or if I'm at the net front, or if the puck's up high and it's getting shot on net, any loose puck that is below the dot, I need to be touching first. Because if I touch first, then I have the opportunity to now hold on to the puck, make a play, or control the play and use my speed and be good at where I'm at there. Now, if I look at it from like an individual skill perspective, when I'm asking an athlete what they're good at, and they're telling me I skate well, I have decent hands and a decent shot. Those are the three elements that I'd say I'm like better at than most, but I can improve upon. Then I'll say this: okay, so what's your process? I'll break down process as skating. Anytime you do a skating or skill development skating drill, or you want to improve that, I need you to be hyper focused on it. What are the areas that you're really good at? Well, I'm smooth on my edges and my stride is good, but my explosiveness isn't there. So then I'll say, okay, maybe one day a week you're skating with a figure skating coach for 30 minutes. Find one at your local rink. That's your process, kind of breaking down that area that you need to improve on, explosiveness. Or if it's stick handling, I'm starting with 5 minutes every single day for week 1 and 2. Then it's going to go up to 10 minutes. And I'm making sure that I'm working on specific areas of my stick handling. And I'll maybe try and dive a little bit deeper. And then I'll go into my shot. I have a really hard shot. I need to work on my release. So then I'll kind of give them a couple different drills that they can do and say, start with 10 shots every single day or 20 shots every single day. If it's someone that shoots pucks already, I'll say 50 to 100 pucks every single day. If there's someone that shoots pucks once every other day or 3 times a week, I'll say just start with every single day. It has to be 10. That way they're doing it. And I'll work on that specific skill with them. And I'll have them write all those things down so that way it's measurable. And I'll have like kind of two sides to the paper, what they're good at as a player in games and where they're good at it and how to execute that in those games. And then from an individual skill development perspective, I'll have them write down those 3 things that they're already good at or want to improve upon and have those action steps. Like I'm going to seek out a coach in this specific area, or I'm going to do something every single day in that specific skill and start at super baseline and then work from there. And that baseline is 5 minutes or 10 pucks of shooting 10 pucks a day, just so it gets them in the door and develops that habit of consistency and working on those specific skills. So a little long-winded there. I apologize for that, but that's kind of like how I look at it from a hockey perspective on breaking down the process from a what am I good at and what's my end goal and how do I become effective.
Great. And what you just did was you separated the two of there's an in-game process and then there's a like kind of an on-ice process with both in practice and in games, but there's also like the training process. And they're both of them are process, and we're saying what are the things that you're in control of that you can go do that both are confident behaviors while you play, but also are the things you need to be doing to get better. And so I do like I separate them, and you separate them too. And you nail it. Like few of the things you were just mentioning were kind of of course the technical elements of shooting or stick handling, or the physical elements of speed or skating, like those, or like talk about weight room stuff or dry
Yep.
land stuff, whatever it
Correct.
might be. Like those are physical and technical. On the training end, I also move into a few other elements of the game that I think are important too. There's the tactical element, which may or may not get time with people, but that we're talking about the strategy end of things. Man up, man down, power play opportunities, or like just formations and the strategy element of the game. We might be watching film. We might be understanding like what your role is within your position, really getting that down. That's the tactical element. There's also obviously the mental element of things we can work on to train the mental piece too. That is part of the deal. People have no problem spending, hours working on their physical and technical game, but then won't spend 5 minutes on it, even though it's the thing that lets them down when it comes time to play. So figuring out what's the thing that they should be training, whether it be focus or breath or, being able to self-regulate emotion, being able to get out of their head, like that's the training element. Then lastly, the lifestyle is something I want to address too with athletes, and that's usually sleep, nutrition, making sure we're hydrating enough, doing recovery stuff, and also not putting in toxins to our body. And certainly at some age, The idea of substances come into play for some, and whether it be alcohol or cannabis or nicotine tend to be three hot items with people in general. And so knowing what, I'm not someone that says, hey, we've got to like stay away from those things indefinitely. Like I know that they hear that a lot. Athletes hear that. That's not my push, but it is to know that we do it with enough moderation to where it doesn't impact performance at all. And we have to know what that is and to hold that line. And so that's the training element and having a process to it. You nailed the measurables of it, being very specific on what you're doing, putting a measurement to it, and then like creating an end goal of I'm going to do this for a certain amount of reps every week for the next, say, month, 2 months, 3 months, whatever that is, but then staying consistent with it and making sure we do that. That's the training process. And so if we switch gears back to the game process, that is something that is the kind of the first element of what I'm really wanting to do with athletes is to have them identify the 3 to 4 to 5 top strengths or strengths, but also the controllable things they can do within their game or meet or competition, that if they were to do those things, their outcomes will tend to trend in the right direction. And I think because of the fear of failure or the fear of disappointment, fear of judgment, people stop doing the types of behaviors they need to be doing to be successful. And so then they start playing it safe. They're not attacking, even though that they should be. Those are confident behaviors. So it's really figuring out what are the 3 to 5 things they can commit to. And then after a game, measure success by did they do their process to the best of their ability, not by did they score or did they have the time that they wanted to get or the score like the for maybe some that like get a score from judges at the end like gymnastics or dance like we can't always control that outcome, so control the process. And that also creates a ton of confidence that we're able to go out and do our job because we can do the controllables. We don't always have control of the outcomes.
So one thing you brought up that I want to talk about and dive a little bit deeper on is you said bring up or write down or have 3 to 5 things in your brain that you know you're successful at or things that you do that make you successful, correct? And I believe if I heard this right, you said that when things go haywire in a game or mentally you start getting in your head because you're not executing to your ability, those are the things that you can fall back on, correct? Um,
Mhm.
so that's kind of the biggest thing is obviously the game, whatever sport it is or business, life, anything, it's not going to go exactly as you envision, as you plan, or as you want. And then once that happens, a lot of athletes who are listening, I'm sure you had the feeling of starting to get in your head about it or get down on yourself or start to go down that negative spiral. Is this kind of a tactic that you can teach some athlete to fall back on? Is start to focus on those 3 to 5 things that you need to do to get you back on track? Because that basically what I'm asking is that what you teach athletes? Is that the best way of going about it as far as stopping going down that negative spiral and getting yourself off of, your game and kind of bringing yourself back into that process, that moment, the present moment, and you know, turning what could be a horrible game into a salvageable game and then potentially a really good one.
Sure. I think it is what I think is a tool in the toolbox. And to have a few different tools that we can rely on is certainly helpful, but to me it is the first tool that I give them because I think it's one of the easiest things that we can come back to is all right, we've just made a mistake or have just gotten criticized. It is our natural reaction to then withdraw and play it safe. And so if we can just take control of the controllables out in our competition and just go keep doing that, then we give ourselves the best chance of coming back. But also, it's not only in the action of doing it, it also gives us something to think about so that we are like not, also when things don't go well, yes, we withdraw, but also we tend to overthink. We get in our heads. And for most people, they begin thinking, thinking, thinking. And we've been taught to do that. When we're in a tough situation, we've been taught to think. But thinking too much is the worst thing we can do. It just like our anticipation goes down and a whole gauntlet of things. So giving them those 3 to 5 things that are process actions, but also become their self-talk is the mandatory first thoughts that I want them to be kind of repping.
Okay.
And it might be for, for let me give a different sport, like maybe a baseball player who's struggling at the plate. It might be for them like elbow back, attack the pitch. Just two things, like elbow up, attack the pitch, or like swing with purpose, like whatever it might be. It's like, what is the process mechanical thing that they need to then just think and do? And it gives them something to fall back on instead of then overthinking. And yes, then get present, get out of their heads. But if we don't have that first thing of, hey, do this, it's a struggle. We always hear, hey, next play, next play. Sure, great advice. That is the right idea. But saying next play doesn't necessarily then, well, what's the next thing? It doesn't necessarily mean that like that's like it then puts them into the future thinking around what are they going to do next versus what's the now play? Like, what's the very thing now that you need to be doing? It could be just skating fast or getting back, or getting on your toes, whatever it might be. But it's like, come back to your process, both in thought and in action, and you've got the first thing nailed.
One thing that I just wrote this down here as you were, it just popped in my head and it made me, it's a very important thing that I want athletes to talk, or I want you to talk about for athletes to know. When we talk about process goals, if you're looking at a goal scorer, whatever sport it is, soccer, hockey, or a spray hitter in baseball, someone who always gets on base, or someone who hits home runs, batting cleanup, whatever the case is, when goal setting and then going back to process, let's just say I have a goal set for I want to get 25 goals this year. Um, it's like, okay, well, we play 30 games this year, so I've got to at least try and get a goal a game, you know?
Mhm.
And then it's like once you miss that one game, there's a little bit of pressure that now gets thrown on you because you're like, oh, I might be falling behind here. And 2 games goes by, 3 games goes by, or you're three at bats without getting a hit, and you want to get a certain RBI. Um, I think a lot of athletes kind of write down those goals as like, I need to get X, X, and X goals, X, X, and X assists, X number of points. And then they start going game by game based on those kind of performance metrics.
Mhm.
The process isn't, I need to be getting a goal a game, or I need to be getting one assist every game, or breaking it down that way. But it's like the things prior to that lead up to it, right?
Nailed it.
Um,
Absolutely.
because I think a lot of people get caught up too much on the amount of goals, the amount of assists, the amount of points, and not the things that lead up to that. And then they start to get in their head when they fall a game or two behind on achieving those goals, or on that rate of progression, that rate of success. Because everything's broken down into metrics now, right? Everything's broken down into, you know, RBIs, point per game, goal per game. They've always been there, but they're more at the forefront now. So I just wanted to kind of talk about how you would instruct an athlete on, I'm a goal scorer, I need to get X amount of goals a year. Um, and when they start to get in those in their head when they fall behind on that, how do you kind of coach an athlete to, setting those goals, developing the action steps toward that, and when they start to kind of get in that quote unquote funk, you kind of touched on it earlier with the baseball analogy, how you kind of get them back on track to achieving what they set out for.
Sure. And isn't that the case that all the goals that athletes set and coaches seem to set with them are always outcome goals? And I'm not against that. It's certainly something you want to move towards and you want to achieve. Swimmers, runners, cyclists, always like they're all the same with I want this great end outcome to happen. And I see a lot of people really struggling when they fall behind or they're not having an outcome day in, day out. And we just know outcomes are not fully in our control. Now, when we become elite and we are the top of a group of people, then yes, we might have more consistency of outcomes in that. But it's like as soon as you become that person, then you likely move up at some point to the next level. You move up to you're at a level where the competition's better. Like it's then as if at some point we become professionals and like, all right, now we're talking like one out of millions and millions of people that are able to be that consistent all the time. And so that's not reality. So yes, sure, have the goals. I want them, and what I say often is think about that goal and obsess over that goal 1% of the time. The rest of the 99% of your time and attention needs to go into your process. It needs to be doing the right things. Like if you're a hockey player and you created assist and you were aggressive and you were had great effort, great attitude, you picked up your teammates, you made things happen, but you didn't score goals. Does that mean you had a bad game? Like we can't measure success off of outcomes that are inconsistent and uncontrollable. So 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 part of it is the yes. I focus heavily on having great processes and like measuring success more on that. But I also know the reality is that people want good outcomes and coaches want good outcomes too. And so it's trying to develop kind of the mindset of sure, outcomes are great, but if I've done everything else well, then it's good enough. And keep moving down that path, keep moving down that path. And if we're not scoring goals, but we're doing the right process, then what's going wrong in there? Like, why are we not scoring goals? If that's like, are we getting shots? Do we need to work on our 1v1 moves? Do we need to work on our shooting to like, what's going wrong in that we can then go back to the training table and then continue to rep there. But it's that constant process of growth you know, and failure is a part of that. So like we're
Mhm.
developing mindsets that allow us to continue to stay strong, knowing that not every day is going to go our way. um, Kobe Bryant back in the day was amazing on that. Obviously he had great outcomes. Kobe wasn't perfect, and he would say like, oh, whether I scored or whether I scored 20 or 30 points or whether I didn't, like, doesn't matter. I wake up the next day, or if I missed a game winner, like, it doesn't matter. Wake up the same day and I just keep doing my process the same. And I really appreciated when he would go there.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think it's the mindset shift of understanding that failure is part of that process and having the ability to look within when things aren't going well and seeing, okay, why isn't this going the way that I want it to? What needs to be tweaked? Um, I think that goes into other things like emotional maturity for an athlete to be able to do that, look internally and kind of see where they're going wrong and how to fix that versus just beating themselves up. But that's a topic for another time, I guess.
Yeah.
But no, I think that's unbelievable that you touched on all these things. I feel like you nailed all of it, especially a lot of things that I wanted to go over with, um, how to break down the process and what actually even is the process. I feel like that's a word that's kind of dropped a lot, a buzzword in sports. And I feel like this episode has been um, fantastic in kind of diving into that and what that looks like specifically, and how an athlete can kind of take those things and put them into their practice and day to day. So I really appreciate you coming on here again and putting out your expertise and knowledge for all the listeners and people watching. So I know that you said you had a graphic. If you wanted to share that before we go and kind of dive into that, we can save for another time if you want. But just wanted to throw that out there and see if it was something you wanted to put in here before we, came to a close.
Well, like it's on a workbook that I have, and if people were to go to my website at positivellyelite.com, one of the very first things that comes up is a free download of a workbook. And so it's in there talking about process, and that might be a better use by just sending this little visual. But it's just a workbook style entries where you can kind of figure out what your process is, and it kind of walks you through that. When I go to work with individuals or teams, I'm bringing that page for sure to like kind of work through it together. And so not necessarily that I have to show it right now, but they can easily get it by going to my website and downloading the workbook.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time as always, and look forward to having you on for more episodes and diving into the other few pillars that we have left to talk about. So,
Great.
yeah,
Yeah.
thank you again for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Danny. Till next time.